Good morning. I hope everyone can see us and everyone can hear us okay. Welcome to this webinar brought to you by People Management in partnership with iTelligence. And today we're going to be taking a closer look at why employee experience is now playing a critical role in driving business success more than ever. My name is Eleanor Whitehouse. I'm acting editor of People Management magazine, and I'm going to be hosting today's discussion. I'm very pleased to welcome our speakers that we've got for you today. Brad Taylor, who's Director of People, OD and Workplace at the CIPD, Mike Thieker, who's VP of HR Value Advisory at SAP SuccessFactors, and Kulan Kandasamy, who's HXM Solution Director at iTelligence. I'll let each of our speakers introduce themselves and say a bit about their work and their organisations. Brad, I'll come to you first, if that's all right.
Thanks very much, Eleanor. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here today. So I'm Brad Taylor. I'm Director of People, OD and Workplace at the CIPD. I've been there for about 4.5 years now, and my responsibility is really making sure that our people get a great experience through attraction, retention, development, and also great workplace experiences.
And good morning, I'm Mike Thieker. As Eleanor said, I lead the HR Value Advisory team for SAP SuccessFactors for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And in that role, we essentially support SAP customers who are looking to transform HR or implement human experience management solutions, employee experience. So we help them shape those transformations, and critically as well, we support them on developing compelling business cases to secure the investment for them to move forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kulan Kandasamy. I work as a HXM Solution Director at iTelligence. My main role is to help customers address their HR business challenges. I've been in this industry for over 17 years, implementing various HR technologies across 30 plus countries. Okay, let's go into into our discussions. Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm really happy and excited to be part of this discussion along with Mike and Brad. So today we are going to discuss some interesting topics around HR, such as HR trends, why we call human capital management as human experience management, and also discuss some building blocks of HR business strategy, and finally, how to go about building a business case for your HR transformation. Also, to pick up your brains, we've got two interesting, very topical poll questions, and please provide your answers when we get there. Okay, let's straight go into the first topic, which is HR trends. Like, keeping up with the trends is never out of fashion when it comes, never out of fashion. So what are the current trends in HR? Let's look at 2020. Let's go back and look at 2020. Every single one of us has gone through an emotional roller coaster this year, which impacted not only our personal lives, but also our workplace as well. So most of us started remote working. Some of us got furloughed. Vast majority of us, vast majority of the business have started upskilling and reskilling their employees. So, and all these are topical, but experts believe that this trend is going to continue in the coming years. On the other side, if you look at before 2020, in general, consumerization of workplace was getting popular, like especially among millennials. So people want to shop around for where they want to work. And all these trends are ultimately leads to employee experience. So listening to your employees are getting very crucial, and taking action on the insights gained is an important element in your HR business, should be an important element in your HR business strategy. Okay, let me stop talking. Let's go to Brad. So Brad, I've read your paper on how CIPD and the mental health at work commitment brings out some valuable points around mental health. So could you please tell us more about what's your take on employee experience and mental health?
Yes, thanks, Kulan. I mean, the way we think about it is that effectively no one really joins an organisation disengaged. We all tend to join organisations very enthusiastic, wanting to give our best, and with a lot of hopes about what we're going to get out of that experience of working with that employer. And then what tends to happen is that things happen along the way that perhaps cause obstacles for people or cause difficulties for people, and that damage of the experience, the employee experience, can have an impact on how engaged people feel and how much they feel part of that organization. So that's one thing that really matters. And I think also is that people more and more are expecting to get the same level of experience from their employer that their employer is giving to their customers. So somehow we have to meet that. And I think when we look over the last year, there's been this additional challenge, in particular relating to mental health. I mean, I think all employers should care about well-being. If you demonstrate you care about well-being, that sends a very positive signal to your employees that you have their best interest at heart. But I think it's been particularly tested this year. Going into lockdown has been probably one of the most strangest experiences that organizations wouldn't necessarily have planned for. When we think about business continuity, it was normally bomb threats. This has been a pandemic. We've had to move people out quickly. And that's all in the context of businesses not really being sure what impact that was going to have on their business model. So if businesses forget about the employee experience along the way, you start chipping away at that feeling of psychological safety, of trust. And therefore, it's been very important for employers to be able to demonstrate that they're thinking about their employees, because we have to remember employees are watching that. So it's things like making sure that line managers feel confident and comfortable talking about mental health with their people. As employers and leadership teams, putting out broad principles about how we're going to manage things as an organization, but still encouraging the individual discussions to take place. Because you could have an employee that's struggling to deal with working from home, with children running about the house that they're trying to homeschool, all the way through to people who are living on their own, trying to deal with that sense of isolation. And what we've seen is that good employee experience has been centered on the line managers who are able to get their people together, have regular conversations with them, talk about their own specific individual set of circumstances, and then work with their HR teams, work with the wider leadership to make sure that the organization is adapting and looking after its people.
Thank you, Brad. Mike, what is your take on employee experience?
Well, firstly, we know from a business perspective that there are a lot of business benefits to delivering a positive employee experience. So things like improved customer satisfaction, improved customer retention, increased revenue per employee, increased productivity. Some of those key metrics that HR functions are looking to impact positively. And we also have other metrics like reduced absenteeism, reduced employee turnover, etc. So the business benefits of delivering a really positive employee experience are clear. There's no really debate on that, and there's a lot of research supporting it. Also, as we've seen, organisations have got a huge focus now on customer experience, and I think there's a strong recognition from most organisations to deliver that ultimate customer experience. You also have to deliver the ideal employee experience as well, and that experience has to be employee centric, it has to be personalized, it has to drive inclusion and diversity, and it has to drive employee well-being as well. And we've touched a little bit on the consumerization of the workforce. This really relates to the changing expectations that we as a workforce have of our working environments, because outside of work, we look at how we use technology and our phones, for example, for every interaction, from banking, from checking into flights, not so much at the moment, obviously, but from socializing, showing photos, anything and everything we do, shopping increasingly is driven by technology and the convenience of this consumer experience supported by technology. And what we're seeing is that employees are expecting that same level of experience and personalization and service from the employers that they're working for. So this consumerization of the workforce is really driving these behaviors, these expectations. And when I talk about consumers, workforce behaving as consumers, it's driving their ability to shop around between employers, because they can very quickly publish information on what it's like to work in my current employer to a massive audience really quickly. Equally, they can access information on other employers and what the experience is like in that organization rapidly as well. So it's this ability to shop around between employers to choose the sort of employee experience that they're looking for that really underpins what I mean when I'm talking about the consumerization of the workforce. If we bring in the COVID card, obviously we've had large proportions of the workforce been working remotely or furloughed, so the workforce has been distributed away from the workforce, and the focus on employee experience becomes even more important in this situation. As we go forward, I think we're not going to move back to a situation where employees are back in the office all the time. I think we'll move to more of a hybrid model, but we will see greater proportions of the workforce at home. And in that situation, it's really critical that we understand what is the employee experience they're having. We need to understand what they need to be successful, what do they need to feel connected, what do they need to be more productive, what do they need from a well-being perspective. So for me, employee experience is critical to how we move forward as organizations, and critical to the success of our businesses.
Absolutely, Mike. That is very critical. Like when it comes to employee experience, it is going to be really critical going forward. And that's why we call human capital management as human experience management. But I'm just going to give you a definition of human experience management before I let Mike explain what is human experience management. So traditionally, human capital management is an approach that perceives employees as assets, but we all know that people are not assets whose value can be measured, right? So that's why SAP are redefining human capital management to human experience management. So Mike, back to you. So could you enlighten us or induct us to HXM or human?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for years, if we look at HR technology, it's been based around process automation and data quality. Both of these things are good. Process automation frees HR up to focus on more strategic activities, to focus more on organizational success. Data quality provides a platform from which organizations can make accurate decisions, so to have accurate decision making around the workforce. So both of those things have been good and are good, but now the focus is really on experience. For a lot of the reasons that we've been talking about already, this consumerization of the workforce, the changing expectations of the workforce. So, as consumers, we're behaving very, very differently. We don't have as much patience as we had. We want things instantly. A lot of what we do outside of work is driven by technology. We want to be able to get in quickly, do what we want, get out quickly. When we interact with technology, we expect that technology to know who we are, what our preferences are, and really support us so that we are not wasting our time effectively. We're in and out and serviced as quickly and efficiently as possible. And this experience now is taking over in the workplace as well. And pretty much every organization that I work with, CHROs, the senior HR leadership teams, employee experience is right at the top of their priority list, because they recognize the business benefits that are delivered from that, and also that strong connection between employee experience and customer experience. And so really HXM is about putting the employee right at the center of operations. And a good way to think about it from a technology perspective is that shift from HR tools to employee tools. So it's not about putting in place technology that makes HR's life easier. That's important, but as well, it's about what technology do we put in place to really deliver that strong employee experience that's going to make people connected, productive in their working environment, and also support the well-being perspective. So how do you do that? From an HXM perspective, it's really about staying connected with employee experience and understanding what is the experience our employees are having. So if we I'd just like to show you a quick graphic on moments that matter. So this is looking at, how do we stay in touch with the experience that our workforce is having, and it's moving away from this annual survey where once a year we ask the workforce questions, and by the time we get the results 3 or 4 months later, we've lost that immediacy, and some of those priorities have changed. So it's really about having that real-time access to understanding employee experience, and understanding two pieces of data. One is operational data, one is experience data. So operational data, many organizations have got access to this. It's simple things like what's the time to fill, what's our offer acceptance rate, time to full productivity, for example, would be another one, revenue per employee, employee turnover. So these are the metrics around what is happening, but they don't necessarily tell you why these things are happening. So the other side is the experience data, and measuring that to give you the why, and that's measuring things like trust, involvement and belonging, satisfaction, feelings of recognition, for example. So if we just looked at the left-hand side, my candidate experience, we know from an operational side what the cost per hire is. We know what the offer acceptance percentage is likely to be. What we don't know is what those candidates are experiencing and how positive that is. If we have both the operational and the experience data, it allows us to make changes, because we're getting that data in real time. We can make changes to the experience data, and then we can look for the impact on the operational data as well. And that's really, really key. Measuring across the points of the employee life cycle, what's happening in real time, and then having the ability to change it. To give you an example, within SAP, we have 25 pulse surveys running continuously across significant points in the employee journey. And we're not asking everybody every time. It's sampling different parts of the working population. So, for example, on performance management, we operate continuous performance management as a process. So after five conversations recorded with my manager, a pulse survey might be triggered, for example. So it's sampling the population continuously across those 25 points. So that's how we go about measuring experience. It's getting it in real time and really understanding what are our people working through, what are their experiences, what do they need to be productive, and critically acting on that information. So over to Brad. What would your views on this be?
Yeah, I'd completely agree with you, Mike. There, we're very similar as well. We have a pulse survey tool that is continually measuring about 14 main headings, and then sort of breaks it down. And those are broken down so that every couple of weeks people are asking just a few questions, varied questions within that, to try and keep it, keep people interested, keep not contribute to survey fatigue overload. But over a period of 3 months, we get a very good picture continuously about how what the employee experience is, and when we think about even this year going into lockdown, there's been additional information that we've wanted to know about what are people experiencing. So, how is the experience for them having to suddenly go into working from home? Have they got everything they need? Are they healthy and safe? Through to what are their changing perceptions about what they think work will look like in the future, and we need to be able to get accurate information around that so that we can make good, robust decisions for the business in the future. And to do that, we need people on board. They need to be able to see that we're doing things as a result of the information that we're asking them to give us, and then plan back to them how things are going to change. So those tools are experienced, and I would completely endorse your point as well about it's got to be done in a simple way, in the way that they would get exactly the same service when they log on and do their shopping or consume anything else in an external context. So it's got to be right up there with that sort of experience. And then I think there's a need for a blend with actually the human feedback that's coming through as well. So not just what are you getting through from the tools, but is that resonating what you're getting from, say, your staff consultation groups when you meet up with them? Is it what you hear your line managers talking about, or the senior leadership team? Is it the things that the HR business partners are coming back and picking up on? And that gradually builds this picture for us in HR to be a dependable voice and sounding board for the leadership team or the chief executive. Because at the end of the day, that's where our value comes in, is being able to help them understand why people are behaving the way they are and what that potentially means for what the business is trying to do. Is there anything on the horizon that's going to damage the organization's ability to achieve its strategic goals? We're getting that very early indicator stuff coming through. And therefore, I think it's important that we're continually thinking about the employee experience, as you said, right from the recruitment point all the way through the employee life cycle. Because as I've often said, the experience that you get in a recruitment situation is a very good indicator probably to how you're going to be treated as an employee once you join the organisation. So it's important to be measuring all of these things and getting the feedback coming through on those.
Just to build on that very, very, very quickly, Brad, I mean, the COVID situation, really shone a bright light on employee experience. And I mentioned the 25 pulse surveys that we run internally. I mean, we obviously use our Qualtrics tool to deliver those pulse surveys, but what we did was we created a workforce pulse survey and offered it free into the marketplace for organizations to use, because they were really struggling with communicating and understanding what's happening with their people. And we had just over the summer, we had 7,000 companies take up that offer. So we saw a big shift in the interest and understanding of the importance of employee experience just over that COVID period as well. So.
Yeah, Thank you, Mike. When it comes to listening, let's listen to our audience and take the first poll question. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, we have a first poll question. The magic of technology should mean this is appearing any second underneath this video. So where the comments and questions section is, just underneath at the bottom of the page. So this question is, how often are employees in your organisation asked about their experience in the workplace? Either once or twice a year, multiple times a year, or continuously, during the exit interview, or never. So if everybody watching could quickly pick one of those 4 options, have a think about that, and we will come back to that in a couple of minutes. As well, generally, if anybody watching has any comments or questions, you can also submit those in the same area of that page, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end.
Thanks, Ellie. So let's go back to our next topic, which is HR business strategy. I think I strongly believe, and people will agree definitely with me, that HR plays an important role in any organizations to deliver its business strategy. In these challenging times, a carefully considered HR strategy, which underpins organizational business strategy, has never been more important. So we touched upon latest trends and how they form part of the HR business strategy. So Brad, what is your view on, or your thoughts around having a good HR business strategy? How does it help the organization?
I think it's critical. I think it has to be clearly aligned to the organization's overall strategy so that leadership see the relevance of it, and ultimately something that is owned by leadership as well. So they feel that they really have contributed to its creation and they have an interest in making sure that it's achieved. I think any HR strategy or any people strategy must have an element in there that thinks about the culture of the organization and the employee experience that you want people to have. And a good way of doing that then is to work with a leadership team to come up with a vision statement. So if you was to project yourself, say 5 years down the line, what would the people who work for the organization be saying? How would they describe the organization and the experience that they're receiving? What would the customers be saying about the interaction with that organization? And therefore really crystallizing it so that people can see, oh, that's what it will be like. That's what it will feel like to work here. That helps us understand why people would want to work for us in the future, and then putting in place, identifying the initiatives that will help bring that about. So what are the things that are in the way at the moment of achieving that vision and making that people strategy come to life? And then what are the resources, the investments that are required, the commitments that are required to make that happen? So that the people strategy is very, very focused, and can be measured. How are you going to measure the progress of the people strategy, reporting it back to the board, back to the senior leadership team, getting if you have a staff consultation group, getting them involved as well. So there's a continual narrative about this, playing it back to the organization's people, and not underestimating how many times you might have to repeat it as well. You know, we've seen that it's very easy for people to become detached from something if they don't continually hear, what is it you're trying to do? So it's an important thing to make sure that, you know, it's threading through the entire organization, so that when initiatives land, you know, if you do a values refresh or you're putting in place a leadership development program, that people can connect it back to the reason that you're doing that, and linking it back to that employee experience vision statement that you've all been working on, so that it has context, it makes more sense. And then when people are asked to give feedback through pulse surveys, they understand why they're being asked those questions and how it's playing back into the overall strategic aims of the organization.
Thank you, Brad. I think that you touched upon how to have a strategy, how is it very important to have a strategy and to bring it to life. So Mike, can you explain us how HR strategy can be brought into life through a business case, or, you know, taking it forward? Can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the criticality of an HR business case, then, you know, exactly what Brad said is what I would say. You know, for me, everything is driven from business strategy. And then from that, you develop a people strategy, obviously, which is what are the skills, capabilities that we need within the organization over time to deliver that business strategy. How do we acquire that talent? How do we motivate it? And then the HR strategy is really, you know, how as an HR function do we deliver that workforce, that set of skills, capabilities, that motivated that workforce. And then we move into the HR operating model, which is what are the processes, technology, org structures in HR, what are the skills, capabilities in the HR population we need to deliver that HR strategy. So for me, everything is driven from that. And whether I'm looking at an HR transformation or an employee experience program or just a technology change, you know, my first questions are around the business strategy. What are you looking to achieve as an organization? Because quite often, if we're looking at transformation, and we ask those questions, the answer we get is, well, we've got disparate systems, we need a single system, or we've got old technology, we need new technology, or we need a single source of the truth, if you like, from a data perspective. But for me, that they are not the outcomes you're seeking. They're a means to an end. You know, what really drives this is, what are you looking to achieve as an organization? How will this change, whether it's technology or employee experience, or an HR transformation? How will that deliver value to the business? Which stakeholders will it deliver value to? So everything comes back to the business ultimately. And a question that is having increasing importance going forward is, what happens if we do nothing as well? And that used to be, well, we have to continue with the processes or the technologies or the approach we had or have for another year. Now I think it's taken on a greater importance, and often the answer to what happens if we do nothing is it's starting to impact our organizational sustainability. So it's having a real impact on the business, how competitive the business is, how sustainable the business is. So from a business case perspective, I'm always starting from, what are those organizational drivers and outcomes? And if we can just take a look at the graphic on the case for change, I'm often asked, what are the components of a really strong case for change or business case? And often I'll see organizations focusing on the bottom left of this chart, the technology piece, and then a little bit on the numbers on the right hand side, the economic part. For me, the technology these days is probably the easiest part, because quite often what organisations want to do with technology is feasible and quite easily feasible as well. Often the numbers stack up as well, but those two on their own are not enough. Just because the technology is viable and works, just because the numbers add up, doesn't mean that business case is going to be approved, because there are multiple projects within an organisation competing for the same investment, and organisations only have limited funds, obviously. So that's where you have to bring in the other two components of this model. The human part, which is what is the real justification for what you're looking to do from a business perspective? What is it you need to do that is recognized by the key stakeholders in the organization as valuable? What are the outcomes you're trying to deliver? What is it you need to be able to do tomorrow that you can't do today? The organizational part of this model is, is it feasible for the organisation to accept the change we need to make in the space of time we need to make it as well? So all four of those considerations need to be brought into play to a really strong case for change. That justification that drives it through, so people really understand what you're trying to do and why it's important to the business, the recognition of the impact on the organisation, and can we accommodate this change, and then the technology that's going to underpin it, and then right at the end, the numbers in terms of the ROI, the net present value, that make sure that the number side is viable as well. So those are the four key elements of any case for change for me. So Kulan, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. So Ellie, do we have a response for our poll questions, or should we?
Yes. So the question was, how often are employees in your organisation asked about their experience in the workplace? 3/4 of people said, no, they didn't, because my questions have just jumped. 3/4 of people said once or twice a year. And then 1/4 of people said multiple times a year or continuously, and 13% during the exit interview only, and nobody said never. So who would you like to talk about that for a second? What do you think about the 3/4 is only once or twice a year?
I think it is really good to know that organizations are listening to employees, and it's not about only listening to employees, but how they are going to take that insights and turn them into actions, right, Mike? So what do you, and Brad, what do you guys think of that?
I think once or twice a year isn't enough anymore. I think it used to be. I don't think it's good enough now for organisations to have a real understanding of what is the experience our workforce is having, and how we can improve it, and how we can really focus on their well-being as well as the productivity and the contributions they're making. So I don't think that's enough. The other question is what is being measured as well. What are we asking them? And it's critical we have that true experience data. We've got lots of operational data, as I said, but I think organisations that don't have experience data are missing a massive opportunity.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you, Mike. I think once or twice a year now, and these days, is a bit like going on a 300-mile journey and just saying, I'll switch my sat nav on a couple of times on the whole trip. I think you somehow want to have a continuous flow of data coming in, or information to be able to adjust, more and more so in today's world. But it's how to do that without people switching off and being reliable information. So I think the sort of tools that we're talking about, and the techniques, and then validating that back with people, are absolutely critical. Plus, also, we're looking to give we want line manager buy-in to these processes and this and commitment of employee experience. And they're not going to do that if they think that they can only change direction once or twice a year. If they can get a continuous flow of information that enables them to do something with it, and they're bought into it and they're engaged with it, then we're going to, organisations, you're going to see the changes that you're looking for. And as an HR function, we will be able to demonstrate that we have much, the relevance that we're aspiring to have with the business ears. So yeah, I think more regularly is definite.
Thank you, Brad. I think now it's time for us to move to our next topic. It's how to build a business case. So I think this is where, Brad, I'm going to look up to you and ask you, put you on the spot. Like, if you have to make an investment on your HR strategy, how do you convince your C-suite stakeholders in justifying that investment, regard whatever that investment may be, whatever, is there a technology for you in the HR department or additional headcounts? How do you go about justifying that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that I hear a lot, and I think it's one that as HR people we raise a lot as well, because we all know, don't we, that we're competing, and as Mike said earlier, we're competing with all the other business cases across the business, and those business cases are often very, very customer focused, in growing the business or its profitability or its sustainability. So in terms of good business governance, we've got to be able to give confidence and reassurance to the board or whoever's making that decision that they're making the right decision, that they're committing the right level of funding to something that in years to come will demonstrate the right return on investment. So I think there's that piece, first of all, is thinking it from their context of their responsibilities, their accountabilities. I think secondly, then there's something about organizational cultural context, because they're all slightly different. What tends to be the main themes that influence how business case decisions are made. Are you working in a very data-driven business, or is it very heavily finance-driven, or is it quite a people-centric organization, which makes it a lot easier because they're going to be more tuned into the reasons that we're looking to do this, and framing the case around that sort of context so that it's landing in a similar way that they're used to seeing other business cases. And then I think there's also linking it back to, it's very similar to normal buying signals as well, isn't it? People don't buy products, they buy the experience or what it will do for them. And therefore, when presenting a business case that's related to some form of HR transformation, they're not buying the transformation piece itself. They're going to be buying into what it will do for them and the organization, its shareholders, all the stakeholders that are related into the business, as well as its people. So thinking about these sort of things, you hinge the business case on the outcomes. So how, what will it mean in terms of better customer experience, better culture, better collaboration, better agility across the business, increased effort, increased commitment from people, increased trust in demonstrating that we care about the people. All of these things, all of these outcomes will have an impact on the bottom line and the sustainability of the business. And it's bringing that to life for your colleagues on your senior leadership team to understand and link into. And then within that business case, also being able to demonstrate how you will measure it. So how will we know that ultimately all of these things that we're saying are going to be the outcomes of doing this piece of transformation will translate into this better employee experience, which in turn will translate into better customer experiences and good business sense as well. So I would say those are the main things. The other things I would pick up on as well is being able to demonstrate the linkages and the dependencies across the organization as well, so that it's not just seen as an isolated HR piece, but in the business case, we're bringing in how that will connect with people in digital and our technology teams. How will it connect with people in our facilities and our workplace experiences teams? What will they be doing to enable this to happen? How will it connect with the customer experience and all of the teams and all the people that are involved in providing great customer experience? So gradually you're bringing in skin in the game and commitment from all of these people and all of these teams to want your business case to succeed, which makes it far easier for you to get that across the line.
Thank you, Brad. I think I'll really like your response on that one. You've been very open and honest about how it's difficult for HR to justify the business case. It's quite a common challenge across HR. So Mike, what is your take on that? What do you think about justifying?
Yeah, it is. It is a huge challenge. At our global user group, we polled them on what's the biggest challenge, or what are the biggest challenges that you see in making changes to HR and securing HR transformation project investment, and they all came back with the biggest challenges they faced were creating a business case. So I don't think it's uncommon at all. As Brad was saying, and as I was mentioning when I was talking through the case for change graphic, it's all driven by the business. It's all got to be outcome related. So what's the real compelling case for change? What are the outcomes you're looking to achieve, and how do those outcomes deliver value to the business and to multiple stakeholders around the organization? I'll tell you a story. A very big global organization I was working with, they were looking at a major HR transformation to change employee experience, to deliver a much better employee experience for their workforce, because they had this strong recognition that that is going to change our customer experience. And I said, great, how are you justifying that in the business case? And they said, by cuts to the headcount in HR. Now, the aspirations and the approach are just so mismatched. It's off the scale from that. But that's quite common in terms of the value that you identify within the business case. So if we just bring up the final graphic and look at the value that you can identify within a business case, and hopefully you can see the text in these little boxes. So on the left hand side, this is what I would typically see in an HR business case that's been developed. The focus is very often on reducing the cost footprint of HR, and just focusing on that. How much money can we save in HR? How many heads can we reduce? And the business case is based on that. Whereas the real value often is in the right hand side of this graphic, in terms of what's the value for business users, what's the value for the business as well, in terms of the stability of the workforce, collaboration, improved productivity, and then on the right hand side, the improved customer sat, the high engagement, business performance as well. As you can see at the bottom, when you take a complete look at the value, the whole value, often you may be getting 20-25% just from the shift or reductions in the HR cost footprint. The real benefit, 75 to 80%, is on the right hand side to the business. And that's why I call this little HR and big HR, because little HR refers to the cost of the HR function, and that's typically 1%, 2% of revenue. If you look at the big HR, the cost of the workforce, that can be the equivalent of about 80% of revenue. So if you can make a 0.5 percentage point increase in productivity, for example, the impact on big HR of doing that just totally dwarfs taking a few heads out of little HR. So the benefits to organizations are on the right hand side, the real value you can deliver from making changes to the workforce experience and their productivity, rather than just shaving some costs out of the HR function on the little HR side.
Thank you, Mike. I think it's time for our next poll. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kulan. Yes, we have a second poll question, which should any minute be appearing in the same place under this video feed. The question is, which of the following are significant obstacles to your company's employee experience efforts? And the options are: senior executive team have not defined it as a priority, difficulty securing investment, lack of a clear employee experience strategy, all of the above, or none of the above, or something else. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to make your selection on that question again, and we'll come back in a minute or two and find out the results.
Thank you, Ellie. I think let's move on to the final topic. So it's about, we've heard from Brad and Mike, like how is it difficult for HR to justify the business case or justify the return on investment. I think that's why at iTelligence, we have released a white paper on how HR can justify the return on investment. Okay, so we focused on a few important areas like performance management, because employee performance is directly relating to the organizational performance. We also focused on areas like learning management, because employees need to keep them up to date. Organizations should be investing in continuous learning culture to keep up with the competition. And finally, data and insight. So you need to know who you've got in your organization, what their skills are, how they're performing. So the data insights are quite key for your organization and your business strategy. So those are the areas that we have focused on in the white paper. So please feel free to reach out to us. We've also got a real life customer story, Mercury Engineering, in the white paper. And the customer tells us how we help them to achieve their business case, eventually their business strategy through technology implementation, as well as solution adoption and business change. Okay. Do we got responses, Ellie? You're on mute.
I am on mute, you're right. It's going so well. We have had some responses in. 36%, so just over a third of our respondents so far, said that all of those options were significant obstacles to their employee experience efforts. Just under a third, 31%, have said lack of a clear employee experience strategy, and about a fifth have said difficulty in securing investment. So it seems like those options are really big obstacles getting in the way. Anybody want to come in on that one?
I will. I mean, the three A, B, and C options are all related, really, because to secure investment, you do need that leadership buy-in, and to get that leadership buy-in, you've got to demonstrate the clear value of an employee experience strategy as well. So they're kind of related. You won't get the investment without the strategy and the leadership buy-in, and you won't obviously get the strategy and leadership buy-in without demonstrating the strong case for change and the link to business benefits of an employee experience strategy as well. So they're all interwoven, I think, all three of them. I'm not surprised by the percentages. I see that quite often.
Yeah, I think likewise I'd agree. It's a huge obstacle, and I think the challenge is having the continuous conversations and the discussions, especially with the leadership team. This becomes an increasing narrative that they're having, that they want to have about these topics as well, so that they see it as an important part of the leadership of the organisation, which hopefully gradually starts pushing against that door.
I think also, I mean, we talk about an employee experience strategy, but what do organisations understand by employee experience? And quite often, organisations look at it and think it's talking about user experience from a technology perspective, and it's not. It's much more than that. It's everything an employee sees, touches, feels, experiences, including technology, and it's looking at that whole experience around work, and are we truly putting the employee at the centre of our operations? So it's way beyond just user experience, it's everything. And it's way beyond just HR tools as well from a technology perspective. It's every system that they touch to carry out their job, every system they touch to collaborate with their peers. Every process and system that's in place to support innovation, it's all of that, and it's putting people right at the centre of that as well.
I think there's never been a better time. If you're in HR, as we all know, we've probably had one of the most challenging years of our career. But think about what's happened is that the whole way we operate has been disrupted. And a lot of businesses now talking about, increased numbers of people working from home in the future. Those that didn't buy into it now seeing actually it can be done. And actually in some ways I can be a bit more effective and efficient. In other ways, it probably drained a lot of us from continuous video conferences and calls. But there is so much that can be achieved, and that disrupted thinking and that increased reliance on HR and people development during this time, and disrupting people's work patterns, getting them to use technology that they may not have used in the past, and collaborate in different ways, even through to seeing actually the business has been able to innovate. This is what we've seen at the CIPD. We've had to do things differently, and it's been reassuring for our people to see we can do things differently. We can run events virtually, and the successes that come from that, the learning that comes from that, I think is a great opportunity to be leveraging that now and think about all the other things that you want to do in the future. What is work going to look like for you? What's the workplace experience and the employee experience going to look like? And start building those cases now to be on the front foot.
Thank you, Brad and Mike. That's really good insights on that poll questions and response. Back to Ellie for our Q&A session now.
Thank you very much, Kulan. Yeah, we've had a few questions in. Keep sending them if you haven't already. We'll try and get to as many as we can in our last 9 minutes or so. We've had one from Jennifer, who was talking about mini pulse surveys. She was looking at rolling out more surveys in her organisation more often than an annual one, but they had some feedback which said that it would be survey overkill. So she wants to know, are your pulse surveys issued after a specific event? And how does it work in terms of rolling those out more regularly than just one a year?
Yeah, they are triggered by events. I mean, the candidate experience is a fairly obvious trigger, because people come through the hiring process. The performance management one that I mentioned, that's triggered by the number of conversations that are recorded from a performance perspective. Returning to work is obviously triggered by coming back into work from maternity absence or long-term sick or things like that. So there are triggers. When we look into the research on the frequency to avoid overkill, it's typically on the short, snappy pulse surveys, which they're not huge surveys like we would run once or twice a year. The shorter ones are maybe 5 questions, tops 10 questions. But people are happy. The response we get is we've been surveyed 4 times a year on the small pulse ones. So you don't survey everybody on everything, but you have to survey a significant number of people to get valid information back. So it's really that segmentation of the workforce, making sure you get a valid representation, but also not doing it to such a wide group that everyone gets sick and tired of doing survey responses. That's one part. And very quickly, I think we've got multiple generations in the workforce. Different generations are more used to completing feedback on transactions, and some of the younger generations, it's just what they do, and they're more inclined to provide that feedback quickly than maybe some of the other generations as well. But yeah, typically four times a year is what people are happy with.
I think excuse me, what we can find as well is that if you get the technology right and the experience is right from using that does help for sure. If it's wrong, you soon hear about it. But also linking it to certain events is useful as well. So we've recently been doing something around lived experience in terms of inclusion and diversity. What's the experience of our Black, Asian and ethnic minority employees, and how does that, and then how do we think about that in terms of our overall culture? What is it playing back to us? Home working, enforced home working is another great time to ask questions around that. And I think all of those things, if people can see that this is giving them voice in the changes that will happen in the future and continuously linking it back, you stand a better chance of keeping them engaged and keeping them completing those surveys and getting the sort of response levels you want. And likewise with the business, playing it back into business leaders, because at the end of the day, it's their people's time that you're sort of taking up as well and asking to complete some of these surveys. But if they see the relevance of it and how it's helping them achieve what they want to do, then you're going to have more commitment from them as well.
And critically, you have to act on the information as well. So just getting the information isn't enough. You have to be seen to act on it as well. Otherwise, people will lose faith in providing that info.
Well, and Brad, you just touched on it, but then we've had another question in about how organisations should factor in inclusion and diversity when thinking about employee experience. Is there anything anybody wanted to add on that front?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think it's so important. I mean, and as I said before, it speaks so much to your overall culture anyway. But I think good surveys can actually reveal insights that we don't see or we just take for granted. and it can challenge those assumptions that exist. So I think definitely any exercises around lived experience or looking into that is important. Survey tools as well are asking increasingly more questions about inclusion and diversity. But again, you've got to be ready to act on it, because it's like anything, isn't it? The moment you ask someone, what do you think about, then people are going to look at it with a much more discerning eye. And so therefore you've got to be ready to respond to it and deal with it. And again, it always goes back to line managers. We need line managers who are willing to have conversations about this. The good line managers are going to be comfortable talking about well-being, mental health, inclusion, diversity, development. Like, these things really, really matter. And acting on those will have an overall beneficial effect in terms of your inclusion and diversity.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think, providing a diverse and inclusive environment that drives or is a critical element of delivering a positive employee experience. So having that diverse and inclusive workforce is part of creating a positive employee experience. And I was looking at a Gallup poll a few weeks ago, where they were looking just at millennials, and 83% of them reported they were actively engaged, and that was in a diverse and inclusive workforce. That dropped to 60% of them being actively engaged when they were reporting they weren't in a diverse and inclusive workforce. So it has a big impact. And how do you go about incorporating this into the employee experience? I would start with the source, really. I would start with a pulse survey on the workforce to look at what are their views on diversity and inclusion in the organization. And then once you've got that benchmark, that then gives you data from which you can build a strategy, and then you can continue with pulse surveys going forward to measure how you're impacting their views and how you're impacting from a diversity and inclusion perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. We've probably got time for one or two very quick more questions. Pauline has asked, thank you for your question, Pauline. She asks, how do you baseline your employee experience? What's the starting point for that? Who wants to come in on that one?
I'll try and answer that. I think I would say the first point is trying to establish a common understanding around the business as to what it's about. What sort of business is it, and therefore what experience are you trying to achieve? It's often surprising that people can have very different perceptions as to why they think that the business exists and what it's there to do and who the prime customers are. And down the line, that can lead in a real divergence in terms of experience all around. So I would start there, common agreement as to what are we here to do? Why are we here? What type of business are we? And therefore, what's the culture and the experience and the capabilities and the type of performance that we're looking to give, and the experience that we want our customers to have. And then build it out from there. I think a good people strategy would be the next piece. So like we said earlier on, linking that into the organization's overall strategy, but thinking about the culture and everything that underpins everything. If you don't get that right, then focusing on performance, capabilities and other things won't really land, because you haven't got the fundamentals right. And then building it out from there. What would you say, Mike?
I think it's similar to what I was describing about diversity and inclusion. How you baseline. So for that, going out to the workforce and getting their initial views on diversity and inclusion, and looking at that data and taking that judgment. Does this reflect our values as an organisation? Do these trends that have been reported back from the workforce, do these match what we want to be known as an employer? On different areas that you're measuring, and I would always encourage starting with maybe 3 or 4. We showed a graph with quite a lot of moments that matter. You're not going to target all of those in one go. You might identify 3 or 4. But again, if it's the candidate experience or performance experience or returning to work, it's take that initial pulse survey info to understand the views. Where are we now? What do people think now? And how does this information, how does it reflect the values that we've got and what we want to be known as an organisation? Because then you're taking the baseline of what are the employees' views now of the experience, and from there you can plan, well, what should it be, and how is it impacting our employer brand? How is it impacting our ability to attract people and retain people? So really gather that data from the current state data is how you baseline anything, and then set the target for how you want to improve it, and run pulse surveys to measure your progress towards that improvement going forward.
Fantastic. It's 11:01, so I think we better stop there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time already. But thank you very much to Kulan, to Brad, and to Mike for joining us today and taking part in today's webinar. It's been a really interesting discussion. So hopefully everybody watching at home found it useful. Don't forget, this webinar is going to be available on demand as well after we finish today. So please feel free to share it with your colleagues and re-watch back at your leisure. And thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.